currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's live episode. It is May 4th, 2012, and I have a fully packed house this evening. Before I introduce everybody, I just want to remind everyone real quick, again, if you're interested in sending or in getting sent a copy of None Dare Call It Conspiracy in ebook format, I will email it to you. Email me at contactdtrh@yahoo.com, contactdtrh@yahoo.com. And the other piece of news I wanted to share with you all is yesterday I had the most pleasant 20-minute phone conversation with Charlotte Thompson Iserby, and she will be coming on as a guest. She's not going to, obviously, I don't want to ask her to stay up late from 10 to midnight, so I'm going to interview her earlier in the day, and then I'll play it on air that night. But yes, we will have a excellent, awesome interview here on Down the Rabbit Hole with Charlotte Thompson Iserby, and she actually thought it was neat. She liked the name of the radio show, so I like that. It brought a smile to my face while I was talking to her. She's got to be the most pleasant lady I've ever talked to on the phone. I swear. It's so weird talking about Skull and Bones and the New World Order with her, because she was just so pleasant. So I'm happy. She's been like my white whale, for as a guest. I've been wanting to get her on, so I was kind of excited. She's a very, very pleasant lady, so yay for me. Okay, let me introduce tonight's guest. As you know, my buddy Steve Stars is a regular to this show. He comes on quite often. And he is joining me tonight again, as is another good friend of mine and fellow show host here on the network, RadChick. And I've had them both on together before. We've discussed what poor Christine has been through with the police harassment because of her radio show and being a guest on other people's radio shows. Twice on my radio show, after doing my show twice, she's been harassed. And she's done other radio shows, and then she's gotten harassed right afterwards. So I don't consider it to be coincidence. I consider it to be a pattern, at the very least. So the last time they were on, Steve had talked to Christina and said that he might be able to get in touch with who we'll call Cousin Paul. And Cousin Paul, the attorney. And he's got an extensive law background. So we're going to be playing a little bit of audio, and I'm going to let Christina talk about what she's been through, and I'm going to get Cousin Paul's raw take on things. So I also want to welcome to the show Cousin Paul. Paul, say hello.
Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Steve, say hello.
Hey, my pleasure once again, Popeye, thanks.
And Christina.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on.
Okay. So, Christina, you've really been harassed. This isn't a coincidence or a just something that, you did something, you pissed the cops off. No. This is almost every time you do a radio show and you start talking about Fukushima, radiation, the health effects, you start getting harassed by the police. Let's get into it a little bit. Let me ask you this, how many instances of harassment have you dealt with now to date? I know the last time I talked to you, just with me, it was twice. So now altogether, what is it, 3-4 times at least?
Well, it's been 2 with me and 2 separate times with my 2 of my kids. And then we've had a whole host of issues with the computer going down. In fact, it went down every day that I went on the air last week, even when I went on other people's shows. So it seems almost like it's directly proportional to how much press we're getting. And we got a lot of press last week because of an article that I put out. And we've had the same kind of problems too when we've had other people on talking about like false flags, like Lauren Murray, who's been a whistleblower against the nuke industry for
Was that the Fukushima
decades.
is falling apart article, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we're going to get into that later, and you're going to see why they would probably harass her. But go on, Christina. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, we had our Skype was taken down when we had Lauren on right after she said the word Stuxnet. It like killed everything. And she's used to this because she's been dealing with this for decades. I mean, I had heard her interviewed about 10 years ago when she was heavily promoting her lectures about depleted uranium. And one of her kids was actually kidnapped during that time. And, there's, of course, a long history of other people that have gone up against the nuke industry, too. But, just even our little show, as soon as we started getting press, or when we've had somebody important on, we've been running into the same problems fairly consistently. But last week it was every day. And it kind of culminated in this event where I got called over to a house where one of my daughters were at for the evening. And as I was leaving there, a cop pulled in front of my car and cut me off. So I had to slam on my brakes so I didn't hit him. And then he acted like he didn't know who I was.
Yeah, that's the audio that I played on your show the other day, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you even schooled him, and I'll play a little bit of the audio for you. But go ahead.
Yeah, I've been getting a lot of feedback from that. I ended up taking it, making it private after a while, just, because I kept getting a lot of advice from people, and they were sending me lengthy emails, don't talk to the cops. And, but I wanted to make a point with this too, because right now there's such a movement towards citizen journalists. Everything seems to be kind of exploding at once. And there's a lot of other people on YouTube and on alternative radio that are going to be running into the same problems if they're not already. In fact, we talked about Dutch Sense the last time I was on here with you discussing this, and one of his friends had been shot last summer. And then the other night, someone tried to break in his house, and somebody, a shill or someone on his site had actually posted the coordinates to his front door online. And he was pretty upset about that.
Yeah, see, that's complete and utter harassment. That's shut your mouth type stuff. That's what that is. That's keep your mouth shut. At least from my viewpoint, and knowing what Dutch has done videos about it. But going back to the YouTube thing, they purge. I would say every month and a half they do a purge, and they just started another one recently. They started deleting channels again and just cleaning videos, cleaning house, and they did the same thing right before the 2008 election. They cleaned house. They took all these Ron Paul videos and everything off. So it doesn't surprise me. And the stuff that you talk about, Christina, is not something that the government obviously wants anybody to know about. I mean, think about it. They don't monitor. They don't pay attention to what monitors are on. Half of them don't work. You know, there are ones that are completely turned off. Canada turned their radiation monitors off. Mm-hmm. So obviously these governments don't care. And they don't want this information getting out. The question is, what did they tell the local cops? You know, what line of crap did they feed the cops to get them to buy into this whole, you know, harassment deal and go after you? Before we went to break, Christina was just starting to get into the harassment end of it. And I want her to get back into what she's been dealing with so I can get Paul's take on things. But I want her to give out her website, Facebook pages, because now she's got like 18 of them, her radio show info. So go ahead.
Well, if you go to fukushimafacts.com, which is a site that Jules helped me put together, there's links to the Facebook pages because we have them on different topics. The main one is RadChick, where we have news, radiation reports, a little bit of everything on there. And then we also have a page I started yesterday called Farming and Fallout, just for people who are working in the produce industry or growing their own food or taking care of animals that provide food, so we can get kind of a coalition of people adding to that subject matter because there's not a lot about it. We have another site we started yesterday called Fukushima Falling Apart, Are You Ready? On Facebook. And it's just to talk about survival stuff and worst case scenario. And then I put out forecasts 2 or 3 times a week showing where the highest fallout rates are going to be based on weather patterns for Canada, the U.S., and Europe. And that comes through my YouTube channel, and then they play them on Orion too. But there's links for everything on Fukushima Facts. So if you get to that page, you can kind of navigate your way through there. And there's informational videos to help people get caught up on what mitigation is and what radiation is and where to go. Links to see the actual fallout monitors for Japan and for the U.S. and for Europe and how to navigate all that stuff too. So we try to break it down and keep it real simple. And then we have the radio show where we have guests from some of these different places and some of the researchers that we've had on. Or sometimes we just talk about news. A lot of times I don't know what we're going to do until an hour or two before the show because there's been so much news going on there recently. And then we have, earthquakes and things like that can affect nuke plants as well and certainly affect Fukushima in Japan, so we have to cover some of that stuff and some of the sun activity and different things and how they all interact with each other.
Well, I think your page, I like Fukushima Facts. That thing is awesome, the website.
Yeah.
It's just packed with information. And that last article that you wrote, which, again, we're going to get into because this thing is... Paul will understand why you're getting harassed after you read the article, or we go over it and you cover some of the facts and what's going on. I want you to kind of. I know it's hard to do it in a nutshell, Christina, but if you could try to sum up your opinion of the harassment you've been through. I mean, I know you could pontificate for ever on it, because the stuff you've been through. But what would you say, what's your opinion of it? Let me put it that way. What do you think? Without even, trying to put you in a direction, what do you think about it yourself?
Well, I've lived in the same city for the last 30 years. So, I mean, I know it's not a small town, but it's not a big town either. I know a lot of the police officers. I had a relationship with one of them who is now the lieutenant of the department that's been harassing me too. And I don't know how that might be playing into this either, because we had a little stalking situation and I had to take him to court over it about 10 years ago. But I mean, that's like ancient history. And I know he still works there and he runs things. So but I do know a lot of those guys, and I know kind of what's normal and expected as far as police intervention, and just what's been going on around us is extremely unusual compared to my past experiences. And then the incidents themselves are always really weird. It doesn't seem like they really know. It's especially the first time when I had come on your show, it was like New Year's Eve, and they had like shown up at our house with, 8 officers and 2 undercovers the next night. I mean, that was just complete insanity. And nobody seemed to know what they were doing there except the undercover guys.
And that was when they came up to you when you were sitting in your car, right? And they were like,
yeah.
Why are you sitting in your car? And you're like, well, I'm in my property. I could do whatever I want.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really odd. And they had told my boyfriend, because they told him to get out of the car first. And he's like, what's going on here? What is this about? And he said, it has nothing to do with you. We're here because of her. And they pointed to me in the car, but they hadn't even asked for my ID or anything. It was like 11 o'clock at night. And we found out later from the neighbors, because I went and talked to all of the neighbors about it the next day to see if any of them had videotaped what was going on out in the parking lot. And they said the police had been sitting there for like 2 hours watching my house from another area. So, they had us under surveillance. And it was when I found that out, I knew for sure there's something really weird, because they have no reason to be doing that under any other circumstances.
And it's and they've harassed your daughter too. It's not just you and your boyfriend. Your daughter twice now, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, Paul, just by listening to the past 20 minutes of what she's been through, 25 minutes that we've been on air here, what would you say, from your experience and knowing how things work behind the scenes, that this is, from your viewpoint, would you say this is harassment?
I would certainly agree with that assessment. Typically, if the police are going to, operate in some sort of surveillance, they're going to be low key about it. They're not going to be open and obvious. They're not going to make a point of being seen. They've got all sorts of different sorts of surveillance equipment, these days, and stuff that I knew about when I was in the DA's office a long, long time ago, to where they can be very surreptitious about it. So to the extent that it's kind of in your face, for lack of a better term, would indicate to me that there's more involved than just plain surveillance.
Steve, what say you?
Well, I remember last time, Christina, we were talking about some of the police officers there that were rather local that seemed even confused themselves as why they were there. And do you remember I asked you, I said, if you make any headwinds or any inroads, I guess is what I'm going to say, into that area to find out why some of these other cops find themselves in this dilemma as well. They're called in, they just show up on the scene because they're on duty, and they're questioning, scratching their heads like, what's going on here? Did you hear anything from any of those people, or have you made any contacts or heard anything down there through the grapevine on any of that?
No, I've been so busy, like I just focus pretty much on this Fukushima thing full time, and I feel like maybe part of it is to be a distraction, and so I haven't really gone down that road and looked into it at all.
It sure seems very strange, doesn't it? And as Paul says, it's kind of like this is almost an attempt of intimidation. We've seen this happen around the country with a number of different people and activist groups. Stacy Lynn, a lady who's been very active in the Agenda 21 ICLEI, they've come after her kids and things like that. Just absurd and crazy things, because they always attack mothers and their children. That's how they work psychologically. So it doesn't surprise me that they're, in this case, threatening, your daughter and some of these other people too. But it certainly seems very strange. And the question is, are there any kind of, maybe Paul knows this, are there any kind of ramifications or things that we can find out as citizens about these kinds of investigations, or are they all just sealed up, Paul?
That's going to depend on a state-by-state matter, and I'm not familiar, with the state you're in, but most states have got something that's a functional equivalent of a Freedom of Information Act, although you can't get into upstanding criminal investigation. But if you're not doing anything
You know
criminal,
what, Paul? I'm going to cut you off right there because we're going into the break. So
all right, very good.
I'll have you pick up and answer the question fresh when we come back. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Awesome roundtable tonight. We'll be right back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to play the audio that Christina recorded of her last exchange with the police here. And I'm not going to play the full clip, but I'm going to play a little bit of it. And actually, while I'm playing it, Christina, do you know about how long into it was when you dropped that little info bomb on him about the cops, saying what the one police force saying to you that what these guys were doing was completely, it was the sheriff's office or whoever it was, but it was like another police agency, and they said that this was highly out of the ordinary?
Yeah, it's a little ways into that. He actually tells me that I can go, and then he's like, "Are you okay? Because you seem upset." And then I was just like, "Yeah."
Gee, you think? So it was about halfway through, you figure?
Yeah, probably.
All right, I'll fast forward it a little bit here. So it's like about 3 minutes, 3.5, and this is random where we're picking up from, but this is her talking. She would, you know what? Kind of like take 30 seconds and set the stage. You were driving back, and that's when like you said, the cop came in and pulled in front of you, right? And like cut.
Yeah. I was just driving out of the subdivision, and the police car, I could see one passed me first, and then this other guy in an SUV police car pulled right in front of me and cut me off. So I couldn't continue out of the sub, and I slammed on my brakes. And then he came over to the window and started talking to me and acted like he didn't know who I was, but it was right away, set me off. Why did he just do that? Why did he cut me off like that? And it was almost the same kind of situation we were in before when we got boxed in as we're sitting in a car in a parking lot.
All right, here we go. That's a good way to frame it because that about picks it up right where I'm going to pick it up from. So good job, Christina. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen.
Putting in right there. No. I'm back out here, and I played with the cat, and, when it looked like everything was fine, yeah.
Okay.
I'm left.
All right. Well, just want to make sure everything's all right. That's it. Okay? Are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. All right. You're all set. You're free to go.
All right.
Okay. I appreciate you talking to me. Now we can get a little understanding what's going on over there.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, like I said, the family's really been through a lot. Both of our families have.
You seem a little upset.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why she was involved in that accident and left and she had work. That's the only reason.
But, all the information that you guys gave me turned out to be BS the next day.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't leave the scene. The information that she gave the other person that you showed me and I wrote down was the license plate, and you told me that it was the wrong license plate. So, there was a lot of misinformation that was a little hard to sort out. I don't know if it's customary to send 8 officers over to someone's house like you guys did and surround us and make such a huge show out of it.
They found, or they saw it, and they called me.
Mm-hmm.
That's why. And then I'm the only one that showed up. Right?
Yeah.
And then I left.
But there was no warrant for her, and the information she gave the other person was correct, and she didn't leave the scene, and what you guys arrested her for was a third-degree shoplifting thing from 7 months ago.
It was a warrant, and they wanted it, so I don't do that.
But the officers that picked her up because you drove her to, I think, M59, and it made an exchange,
yeah.
They questioned her all the way to the station and said, "What's going on here? This is highly unusual. I can't believe they called us out tonight for this." They would kind of talk smack about you guys, and that just made everything seem a little even more strange.
They can talk whatever they want. I'm doing my job.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Her name appeared up with a warrant. they confirmed it. They wanted.
All right, that's the part I wanted everybody to really hear, because you can hear his reaction. He kind of blows it off, but you can see that he wasn't prepared for you to say that to him, Christina.
Yeah, and this was total crap. This is what they then said was the reason for coming to my house back in January after they messed with us for a couple hours in the parking lot. Then they said there was a warrant for one of my kids who had been in a fender bender the day before. And I knew about that. She had been out to dinner with her dad, and she pulled out of the parking lot, and another lady hit her, and they exchanged information. And he said, well, she didn't stop. She left the scene of the accident. And I'm like, I know she stopped. I know that she talked to the lady. And then later he shows me the piece of paper that she actually wrote all the stuff out for the woman with the license plate, with all the information, contact numbers, and it was all correct. I mean, it was so blatantly obvious that, like, they were just using that as a cover, and then he brings this up again. Well, she had a warrant. We were coming over there because of the warrant. There was no warrant. When they took her in, they took her to Sterling Heights, to their jail. It was for this really old shoplifting thing, which she was with somebody that had stolen a CD. So it's like a third-degree shoplifting offense.
Yeah,
and
so
there was no warrant for that either. I went and I picked her up that night.
So the lies. So the warrant was a lie. The thing where he said that she had warrants, that was all lies, and obviously a shoplifting offense doesn't require 8 cops, coming in commando style. Paul, what say you?
It's a very interesting topic. But Christina, have you noticed that these incidents take place after you make statements or broadcasts on particular subjects or particular similar incidents, anything like that?
They seem to happen every time I come on Popeye's show.
Yeah, I'm a magnet for it.
Or after that article came out. But you know what happened after this, and Popeye, you don't even know this, because I didn't know, and I didn't find out till the next day. After the police told me everything was okay and I could leave, they went back to the house and they arrested her and took her to jail. And she was in jail for 2 days before I found out and could go get her. And they arrested her for this warrant for this car accident again. And then when I went to the jail, they said, oh, yeah, they threw that. They're not having that case. She can go. So they kept her in jail for 2 days. And she was really sick when she got out of there.
Wow. That's interesting. There's no warrant provided, apparently, and now there's an arrest in 2 days. How old is she now, Christina?
She's 19, and the only thing that we know of that could possibly be any kind of legal situation is she has a parking ticket in Detroit that she didn't pay for, which is Wayne County. That's the only thing that we know of.
Well, somebody better call DHS. Somebody better call DHS, because obviously she's, a criminal. A parking ticket. Ooh. Just ridiculous, the harassment that you guys go through. It really, it's one thing if they harass you, but to go after your kids and mess with your kids as a way of telling you to shut up, that's low. That's slimy and it's low. It really is.
Well, after the first incident, my girls and I all had a really long talk about the situation and what I thought might be happening and why it was happening. And we all agreed that this information is way more important than any of us and that it needs to continue, despite whatever they might try to do.
Yeah, I say continue, because that's what they want. If you give in to them, then they win. So
the benefit far outweighs the risk.
Yeah, because you know what? Look, eventually, if the worst case scenario happens, which we'll get into about your article, then I really wouldn't worry about police harassment, because there'll be radioactive glowing zombies if everything happens the way it could. Mm-hmm. So I really wouldn't worry about it. Eventually, everybody, it'll be like playing a zombie video game outside. And I say that with a slight bit of humor in it, but it can be quite a reality very fast, as we will get into, because Christina's article is, it really breaks it down. And obviously, it's something that is going to attract attention and cause her to take shots across the bow, as it were. So, we're going to be coming up to a break in a minute. So, I want to get into your Fukushima article. And I want to kind of give a hint as to why you're getting harassed. So, we'll be back. All right, we're back. I was going to have Christina get into the Fukushima article. We'll start getting into it this segment, but we can hold off on that until the second hour, because there's plenty of time. I want to give a little more time to her, because she's got some questions for Paul, because obviously he has a legal background. And I want to give her some time to have those questions answered and get his take on things, plus Steve's take as well. So, Christina, you got your questions ready?
Sure. One of the things that's probably a little obvious from some of the comments I've had is you shouldn't have talked to them at all. And, I really don't know, like, what in this situation should I be doing or not doing? What kind of paperwork should I be asking for? And for other people out there too that are doing the same type of like citizen journalist stuff, like what do we need to know to protect ourselves from having these incidents happen and not be like too upsetting to anything?
Paul, what do you think?
Well, okay, as you're talking about what it is you need to say to the police officer, as a general rule, you have a right to remain silent. You have right to ask them, whether you're a suspect or a subject of some sort of inquiry. You can certainly ask him that. Now, where I practice in Texas, you have to give them identification if they ask for it. But that's pretty much about the only thing you have to give them, kind of like the old name, rank, and serial number. Mm-hmm. If they're asking for identification of who you are, you need to give them that. Other than that, you don't have to say anything. You can say, look, I want to talk to a lawyer. You can always say that. And that should stop them in their tracks. Now, they can ask additional questions to ascertain whether your request for a lawyer is exactly what it is that you're asking for. But other than that, once you ask for a lawyer, then they need to stop. Now, as for the paperwork that you're talking about, if they've got warrants that are in existence, you should be able, to discover those. And I was mentioning, at a break earlier on, how a lot of states have got laws on the books that are a lot like the Federal Freedom of Information Act. I know that here, like I said, where I am in Texas, they've got a state law that works basically the same way. You may be able to avail yourself of, and what state are you in, Christina?
Michigan.
You may be able to avail yourself of something like that to try to find out what sort of information that these people are getting, or whose orders they're acting on, or where they're getting these so-called warrants, or whether they've got any warrants at all. I mean, that's the best I've got for your questions right now. Steve?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty good. Now, you mentioned that the means of citizens finding out about investigations, and of course, this may not exist in every state. Christina, we'll have to find out what it's like in Michigan. But, I think if these warrants do not exist, there's certainly a problem with false representation of an apprehension that, I don't know enough about that, Paul, like you might, but this is a false arrest. I mean, you can't go around saying that you have a warrant if you don't. And I think any case or any situation that is unwarranted should be challenged some way, and that seems like that would be applicable to all states. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but certainly you can't just go around saying you have warrants when you don't, and somebody has to be able to check on that somewhere, I would think.
Well, Steve, there's a difference between a detention and an arrest. Police can legitimately, walk up to you and essentially do what they call a Terry stop. It's Terry versus Ohio. It's an old constitutional case where the police can come up and stop you and detain you and ask you questions. They actually do a frisk for their own safety, and they don't call that an arrest. If they put the handcuffs on, then you got an arrest. That's a different deal.
Okay, good. Now, would you recommend that she might get some sort of legal representation that anytime this kind of stuff starts to happen again, that immediately she can call on this person, or what would be the best course of, proactive activity for her?
Christina, how active do you want to be? I mean, tell me, free associate.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of time to deal with this stuff right now, and I really don't want the distraction. I mean, I know a lot of those documents and everything are there, I guess, if they're ever needed, but it seems like if there is some kind of false arrest situation that's gone on here, is this like an internal affairs problem? Like, who do you complain to when the police might be doing something wrong?
That would be my first step. If I had a problem with a police officer and I thought they were overreaching, I thought they were operating outside of the bounds of the law, it would be internal affairs. That would be where I would start. Now, that's not where I'd finish, but that'd be at least where I start.
Good. Yeah. That's a good place to start. Of course, talking about this publicly is another thing as well. It sounds to me like that some of this harassment may have taken place while your daughter was a minor, if I'm not incorrect. And so this kind of stuff is actually, borders on problems with, a disruption to your family unit as well. I don't know if that figures into this, but that might be a factor as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was 18. She was 18 and had just turned 19 the night that happened.
I tend to agree with you, Christina, about the distraction end of it, because it'll force you to take up a lot of time and deal with this.
Right.
And that is another tactic that is done and employed upon activists and people such as yourself.
Sending you on a wild goose chase.
Yeah. So basically, you waste all your time and your money.
Well, Christina, have you made any outreaches to any lawyers? Because, a lot of times lawyers will do things pro bono. I mean, you got to look around a lot of times, and you may or may not be able to find somebody who'd be willing to help you. But, a concern that you're voicing, the work that you're doing, you'd think you'd find someone who's, suitable.
Yeah.
Suitable to the event, such that, once you turn it over to the lawyer, you really don't have to mess with it. The lawyer would be the one that would be doing all that work.
Yeah, that might be something I have to consider. I know when the first incident happened and I came back on Popeye's show the next day to talk about it, I had a email from someone who had offered to assist me. They were out of state, but they said they would be happy to look into anything that I needed them to do, and that they supported the cause. So maybe I'll look that person up and see if there's any help that they can give me.
Yeah, excellent.
Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I was just going to say, go ahead, Paul, because you probably know more about this than I do, but we do need to get some legal representation for all of what's going on, because this whole thing with Fukushima, friends, is much, much bigger than anybody realizes or anybody wants to admit. I can only tell you from my perspective in the media, the reason why they're not talking about it is because it's that bad. That's the reason why they're not talking about it.
We got a few minutes before we go to break, guys, so what would you... what advice to kind of like wrap it up, where would you send her to get some help? Either Steve or Paul, whoever's guy. I guess maybe Paul, because you're the one with the Uber legal experience. Where would you tell her to look so that she can get maybe some? Because obviously she needs it pro bono, and the guy should be doing it pro bono for the work that she does pro bono. So where would be a good place for her to start? Because maybe if she had some sort of representation, the sharks would leave her alone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we have some legal aid, societies in my area too, but I don't know if this is something they would even want to get into.
They probably wouldn't even touch it.
I haven't called them, so I can't say.
No, I used to be on the board of directors at the local legal services corporation provider, Legal Services of North Texas. It doesn't sound like the kind of thing that they would get into, or that you could get, an attorney for. I don't know that you'd have a lot of success going down there and trying to get something through LSC. There may be the Michigan, State Bar. I know in Texas they've got a lawyer referral service, and Michigan may have the same sort of thing. If you call them and ask them, you could perhaps shop around, see if you can find someone. It may take a little bit of time while you're looking, because it's hard to get folks to work for free. But that if it was me and I was in your shoes, that would be what I would do.
Okay.
All right, cool. Well, thank you for the pro bono legal advice on Christina's behalf, Paul.
I appreciate it.
That is very nice of you. You see, fellow attorneys, maybe you should take a note from Paul there. He just gave her some free legal advice on air because he's a decent human being. Perhaps maybe you guys should try to live up to his standard. All right, hour number 1 over. Hour number 2 coming up. Don't go anywhere. No one's leaving. Roundtable continues. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. It is Friday, May 4th, 2012. I'm hanging out with RadChick, a.k.a. Christina Consolo, Mr. Steve Stars, and Cousin Paul, the lawyer. In the first hour, we've gone over the harassment that Christina's gone through, and she was able to field Paul was able to field some questions from Christina, and hopefully she got some good advice. And again, I want to give Paul a big thank you, and the other lawyers out there should take a hint, okay? Perhaps you should step up to the plate like he did. Now, Christina, let's talk about the information that causes you to get harassed. Fukushima. It's a hair's breadth away from collapsing and falling apart. What is it? Building 4, reactor 4?
Yeah.
Now, if that thing goes, that's full of MOX fuel rods, correct?
Well, it's full of fuel rods. It's got 1,500 and some fuel rods in that pool. Some of them we believe are MOX. It's kind of difficult sometimes to sort out the information from TEPCO because they change their story so many times. And Senator Wyden had gone to Fukushima a few weeks ago and toured the site, and he was very disturbed by what he saw going on there. And he has something to do with the Department of Energy. I don't know exactly what his position is, but he had gone to Fukushima, and when he came back, he sent out a press release about how concerned he was about the situation. He wanted there to be international assistance immediately to help with this spent fuel pool. And, he went on a couple of shows and he talked about it. He didn't talk as much about the ongoing releases that had been coming over here for 13 months, which is, a whole nother issue of contamination. And we're starting to get some big numbers on the fish that are being tested independently. And even the USGS has released some of the preliminary data from soil contamination on the West Coast. And it's only from March 11th through April 5th It was actually around March 17th or 18th that the first plume hit. So they took soil samples right at the beginning, released that data, and it showed a high level of contamination in LA, in Portland, and in Boulder. But in all 24 cities that they tested across the country, they found contamination. They didn't release those numbers. We know from independent researchers that they found plutonium as far as Boston. They found plutonium, and it's been traced back to Fukushima all the way in Lithuania, so it's blown over us before it went there. And we had been told from the beginning of this that the particles are too heavy, the really dangerous stuff is going to fall into the ocean, and the ocean's going to take care of it, and that's not what's happening at all. The concentrations are staying the same, or they're getting larger, and we were told that they would decrease over time. The numbers are going up in the food chain, and we have, contamination in our milk supply. We've had contamination in our milk supply since April of last year. And the EPA shut down testing. They're not testing rainwater. They're not testing soil. They're not testing food. They're not testing milk. And they need to be doing all of these things. The only thing they did after shutting down the testing is they increased the allowable levels of contamination in all those products. And the numbers for those products are set to either a yearly exposure or a lifetime exposure. When you're having it come at you from multiple sources, those numbers need to be decreased to take that into consideration. Plus, we're looking at this for long term, because this place isn't going to get shut off for at least 30, 40, 100,000 years. We don't know. Everything TEPCO has said has turned out to be not true. They said 30 or 40 years. Now they're saying more like 100 years. Physicists have been saying, Michio Kaku said it's going to take centuries to decommission the plant because we have no technology to get the melted fuel out of the ground. And it's sitting there and it keeps setting itself off. It goes through this like feast and famine cycle where it heats up and it releases isotopes, and then it kind of shuts itself down again, and then it steams up again and the steam comes out of the ground. And Arnie Gunderson had described it like a radioactive dragon breathing underground. And we've been watching the cameras on the site for the last year, and we see all this fog around the site, and at times we've seen actual like brown or yellow smoke coming out of some of the reactors or the basements of the reactors. And TEPCO acknowledged the other day at a bar association meeting in Tokyo that the steam that we're seeing around those plants is all radioactive that's coming out of the ground. And it comes out of the ground and it blows over here, or it blows into the ocean. And those currents are taking it right to the West Coast. We have a debris field that's coming on its way to the West Coast.
Debris is already hitting, and it's hitting like way before they said it was going to hit too. They just found a Harley Davidson. Did you see that?
Yeah.
And everybody's touching it. I'm like, guys, that thing's metal. That thing's probably glow in the dark. I wouldn't go anywhere near that without a Tyvek suit and a Geiger counter. But they're Harley's like, oh, we'll restore it. So all those poor mechanics are probably going to develop cancer because they're going to be touching stuff on it. God knows.
Yeah, and the news did a real like feel good story about that whole situation. How Harley traced the VIN number back to the owner and got them together on Skype, and they want to meet each other. But no one talked about measuring it for radiation. The tires, especially anything on that bike that's porous, like the seat or the tires. Like I would think there might be more radioactivity there. But every expert that I've asked this question to, who's not a shill, has said that stuff's going to be radioactive. It's had hot particles raining out over it for 13 months, and it's floating in radioactive water. But I mean, that's not even, the fuel pool is really what the article was about, and how precarious the situation is, and how we need every person working on this problem. There is no greater problem facing us right now than that spent fuel pool. Because what's going to happen, and that article upset a few people, but it also woke a lot of people up and got them looking into this. And we're having all kinds of requests now of people who want to help out on administrate the Facebook pages, and so they can immerse themselves in this and catch up to what they need to know to protect their families. And it's all like really easy stuff that should have been shared a long time ago, but that would have meant acknowledging the problem, acknowledging the contamination, and what friends of mine that work in the industry are saying is that the United States is so contaminated right now that the whole thing needs to undergo decontamination. And that would mean taking the first 6 inches of soil up from everywhere and disposing of it as radioactive waste. And this would need to be ongoing because the releases are ongoing. And I mean, it sounds like such an enormous problem, and it is, but if we have the right people working on it, we can find solutions to this. But people have to know about it. You know, and 95% of people don't even know what Fukushima is. They certainly don't know that it's still going on.
Oh, I had a conversation with somebody that's close to me about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago about this. And I mentioned Fukushima to them, and they went, "What's that?" And I went, "How do you not know what Fukushima is? Don't you remember the Japanese earthquake? Oh, is that plant? There was a power problem or something, right?" And I was like, "A power problem? It was a no, what? Like, do you not pay attention to what's going on?" And they actually go to them. This is someone that goes to my site on a daily basis for news. So I was I was like, "Do you not see Fukushima when I post articles about it? Like, do you not pay attention?" It amazes me how many people have no idea what Fukushima is, Christina.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the media's fault, and they're just as guilty for covering this up because everything that they've run, you know, the titles are misleading. They talk about it, the plant being in cold shutdown. There is no cold shutdown at that plant. There never has been. And anybody who would have looked into it would have known that. And, you know, they keep promoting this agenda that everything is safe and stable and under control, and it's far from being under control.
Yeah, it's far from it. All right, we're going to get cut off by the break. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. All right, Christina, so if this building collapses, right, is it just going to be a collapse? Or is it going to be an explosion because of the collapse? Or whatever, an earthquake cause an explosion, and then all that crap goes up in the air? That's the main concern right now, right?
Well, there's a couple different scenarios that could happen that could damage the integrity of the pool further because it already has a crack in it. They've had trouble maintaining water at times. And those fuel rods have to be covered with coolant, and it has to be a certain temperature all the time, or it'll start fissioning, and because it's so closely packed together in this pool, it would probably get out of control very quickly. So they have some instrumentations that can monitor the temperature of the coolant, but whenever the cooling system shuts down, those thermometers don't work. And this happens off and on. It just happened maybe about 2 weeks ago. The cooling stopped, and it was all, you know, it was very frantic over there until they got it started again. And if those rods become uncovered and they start melting down, they could catch fire. They could have something called a prompt criticality, which would be where they explode, like the explosions that we saw previously. There could be a hydrogen explosion, although it's probably not as likely because the building is so open. There's no place for hydrogen to really build up like it did when the units were closed and they exploded. Or if the building, if there was an earthquake, it could damage the pipes that are helping the function of the cooling pool. Or the whole thing could collapse on the ground and start fissioning and catch fire that way. So there's a few different scenarios, all of them bad, especially for Tokyo. If something.
Oh, okay. So if 4 collapses, it would be more of a fire than a big boom like it was with the first time that there was an explosion over there.
Well, that's what they think, and that's what kind of the article was about, was the seriousness of that event. And knowing that there's such a large majority of people that don't know anything about this too, you have to kind of ease them in to the situation And that's actually not the worst thing that could happen. Because if the spent fuel pool collapses and starts fissioning, it can prevent the workers from being able to get anywhere near the site, which means they have to evacuate. And that happened early on in the crisis after 3/11. And then nobody is monitoring all the other pools and all the other reactors that they are dumping tons and tons of water on day in and day out. So the whole place could go up. And if that happens, it's likely they would have to evacuate the power plants that are south of there or north of there, depending on which way the wind is blowing. But their first priority is going to be to evacuate Tokyo.
How bad do you think it would get, if, let's say, the building collapses and it catches on fire?
Well,
how bad do you think it would get for us?
Arnie Gunderson, in fact, there was an article that came out today on Any News about it, has said that people should evacuate to the southern hemisphere. And Helen Caldicott, who has also been very vocal about this, has said that she has plans for her family who lives in Boston to evacuate to the southern hemisphere. And then the other problem
is that an if or they are?
They are. If the spent fuel pool falls, they are going. They have plans to go. And the rest of us who can't afford to do that would have to shelter indoors here for a period of time, which is going to be anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 years or longer, depending on how long that fire burns. Because as long as that thing is burning and it's kicking out, highly radioactive smoke, we would have to stay inside and wait for a period of time after all of that calmed down.
Yeah, that'll work because we won't run out of things in about 3 days.
Well, right, exactly. How many people are prepared for that? And the title of the article that's coming out tomorrow on End the Lie about this topic is called What will collapse first, the economy or the spent fuel pool? And the preparation is actually the same kind of for both of those things, except with the spent fuel pool, you won't be able to go outside. And the other thing is, if people can't go to work and kids can't go to school, well, we have 104 nuclear plants over here that people might not be able to work at either. So what I foresee happening, if that scenario would occur, is that they would shut down all the plants, and then not only would we have to shelter in, but we're not going to have electricity.
Yeah, and you can't use, in an economic collapse situation, you could roll out a solar-powered generator, but not if the spent fuel pool goes. Then there's going to be a bigger problem. Why have they not tried to figure out something that they could perhaps... I don't know. I mean, I know they have all sorts of technology. Can't they figure out something like erect some sort of tent from the inside or something, a massive or some sort of structure to kind of keep it covered in case it does go up, so that it's inside the structure only?
There's a lot of things that they could have done that they should have started on 13 months ago. And the first thing, probably, because the integrity of that pool was compromised as soon as the building exploded. And at first they had said, the damage to Reactor 4 is because Reactor 3 blew up. But I've got pictures from satellite showing that reactor was fine. There was an explosion later that might have come from hydrogen that came through the vents of Reactor 3. Or there was something going on in that reactor that we weren't told. Like it might have been just, for instance, refining uranium for Iran. Because Japan had agreed to do that 2 years prior. That reactor wasn't supposed to be running. It was supposed to be under maintenance. And that's part of the reason why the fuel pool is so full, is because the brand new fuel rods that were supposed to go in it are still sitting in that pool, but something caused that building to explode, and it's been a subject of a lot of debate of what exactly happened there. But the integrity of that pool was compromised a long time ago, and if they knew how bad it was, I don't know why they didn't build a wall around it and fill the whole thing with concrete right at the beginning. They put jacks underneath the pool, and they released a video last weekend of some scaffolding that they have on the sides holding it together, but I mean, it looks like the same scaffolding they put up at concerts. You know, and that's what, you know, Senator Wyden was so upset about, was that there should be an international effort, because everyone has been treating this like it's Japan's problem, and it's not Japan's problem, it's everybody's problem. Because this will affect the entire northern hemisphere if this thing goes down.
And the problem could have been solved if you know, or at least I don't mean the problem of everything melting down, but at least I believe that in 13 months they could have come up with some sort of solution to at least mitigate it somewhat. You know what I mean?
Right.
If you had all these different minds, you know, from Germany, England, Poland, wherever, all over Europe, all over the world, everybody got together and said, we need to come together on this. You know, we need to put everything aside. We need to figure this out, because this is bad. You know, this is really bad. This is not something that should be taken lightly. And you're right. Everybody's kind of just like, oh, it's not really our problem.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to worry about it.
And the problem isn't going away, and it needs to be dealt with, you know, right now.
So only the southern hemisphere would be safe. Interesting how all of these elitist dirtbags are buying up land and freshwater aquifers, I may add, in the southern hemisphere. Interesting. Kind of, you know, I don't know if the tsunami was man-made or how the explosion, you know, happened there. I've looked into it a little bit. We've done shows on that. We've talked about all that different stuff. But the one thing I can say is the reaction to this, just like the reaction to the BP oil spill in itself, is criminal. And both of those situations should have garnered worldwide help. Now, yes, in the situation with BP turned away a lot of help. In this situation, it's different. People aren't, I don't think, taking this as serious as they should. And I really think we need to make the effort. And when I say we, I mean any host that listens to this, anybody that's got a website, and anybody listening who pick up your phone, call your local representative, have your family and friends call, write letters, complain, call your local news stations. I mean, get on it. Like, if you've ever been pissed off about anything, this is something to get pissed off about, because, I don't know, it's just your entire way of life. So maybe, just maybe, this will get you up off your butt and get you motivated to do something. If ever you've wanted to get involved in anything, okay, I would get involved in this. You don't have to believe in conspiracy theories or UFOs or Bigfoot or whatever they throw at you, okay, to realize that the situation with Fukushima, is a bad thing. Okay, don't let anybody make fun of you and say, oh, don't worry about it. No, worry about it. Okay, get active, get involved, and do something. Let's try to get the world, maybe, just maybe, we can get other people pissed off, and we can make this a big enough problem that people will start to pay attention to it. See, the problem is right now nobody pays attention. The news media is too busy worrying about whatever latest tart of the week, you know, got high and got caught shoplifting or whatever else they feel like filling the airwaves with that week. You know what I mean? They don't pay attention to the important stuff. So people need to get active, and they need to pay attention to Christina, because her reports are important. And she does all this for free. She doesn't get paid to do this. They have people that make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and they go on TV and they lie to you, and they tell you not to worry, not to prepare, not to do anything, not to care. And Christina does this for free, and she gets harassed by dirtbag cops. And that's not her saying that, by the way, so don't take that out on her. That's me saying it.
You know, and those cops are probably one of the primary vocations that are getting exposure because of the amount of time they spend outside. They haven't been told to wear masks when it's raining, or, you know, when they're pulling cars over and things like that. Like, they're not even taking care of their own people, so to speak. You know, there's been such a concerted effort to keep this under wraps, to protect the nuke industry. And what you'll run into is if you try to get mainstream news, even your local news, to cover this, is that a lot of energy companies have airtime, run commercials on the local news. And just in my state of Michigan, DTE is on every commercial, and they supported the governor's campaign, as well as Dow Chemical and, the places that are making people sick that should be reported on the news because of illegal dumping or because of these radiation releases. I mean, I go through that list a couple times a week from the NRC. I can't even fit them all in. Today I had to drop a story about Fort Calhoun off the nuke event list because I just didn't have the room for it. There's so many of those every day.
Do you realize what you just said? Do you realize how bad that is? That there's so many events going on at different places that you didn't have time to fit it into it. I mean, that's so much that there shouldn't even be one or two, just for the people that aren't too sure about this. There shouldn't be any at all. This is really a bad thing. Let me ask Paul, because you're totally new to all this information. You're completely, I'm sure that a lot of this is the first time you're actually hearing most of this. And I know we kind of discussed it during the break for a few seconds, but what's your take on all this? Are you just flabbergasted that the media hasn't even bothered to discuss any of this at all?
The only person that I've ever heard really take Fukushima seriously was Rachel Maddow on MSNBC. And she covered it at length for a couple of weeks, maybe a little bit longer. But, it's just a sad and bitter irony that the island nation of Japan that got, decimated with nuclear weapons, in the 40s, has had this revisit them. It's just almost kind of like, what in the hell were you guys thinking?
And their nuke industry is controlled just like ours, right, Christina?
I don't know really the politics behind.
Well, from what you've seen, because from what I've seen, I would say it's controlled. I mean, because they've been pretty complacent with TEPCO from the beginning.
Yeah, and then there's the whole refining uranium business, which made the U.S. and Israel very unhappy, and that's a verifiable story.
Popeye, I'd like to ask a question, and I think Christine can, elaborate on this and give comparisons. Let's talk about Fukushima in comparison to Chernobyl. Now, as I understand, there were at least 1 million to 1.5 million fatalities that resulted from primarily childhood leukemia and things like that over the years from Chernobyl. How much bigger or the same size, or what's the comparison between Chernobyl and Fukushima, Christine?
Well, there's been a couple different experts who have worked out the numbers based on the fuel that's already gone up and the explosions that have happened and the data that we have. But it always seems to get changed down the road to a much bigger number. But the last time I asked a researcher, it was Lauren Murray, when she came on my show, and she said it was 300 Chernobyls. And I've heard estimates that it's as high as 1,000 Chernobyls.
1,000 Chernobyls. 1,000 Chernobyls.
As it is now, not considering this whole other situation of the spent fuel pool falling and the whole place going up.
Oh, man. Well, that's not news, is it, Popeye?
No. Didn't they say the global wait till you hear this one, Steve, if you and Paul haven't been shocked enough. Didn't they say the global food supply? Now, I would say it's already been, but aren't they admitting that within like the next year and a half, the whole global food supply will pretty much be irradiated?
Yeah, it's already being detected in large fish, in deep water fish like tuna. It was detected months ago, and normally when in the food chain, it starts out with the smaller organisms. It actually builds up because the larger animals are eating smaller animals. Therefore, they're getting more particles. It seems like it would get diluted in a larger animal, but that's not what happens. It builds, and it's called biomagnification. And we're already seeing that in large fish. There was some radiation detected in the seals that were sick, that were found in Alaska, and their preliminary testing, because they hadn't tested for cesium and plutonium and all these individual isotopes, their preliminary testing was that it was an amount of radioactivity that they thought was normal for ocean animals, because we did all these peak testing. We had all these bomb tests, and countries all over the world bombed, atolls and did all kinds of crazy tests back in the day, and a lot of that was already floating in our ocean too, and actually contributing to our weather patterns and causing some of our storms to get stronger. And this is something that we've been wondering about, seeing all these tornadoes that have been happening, and some of the systems that have moved in here, and that has seemed to be escalating since Fukushima. One of the first big storms after Fukushima was the Joplin tornado. And we've had events in the past after large atmospheric detonations where we had tornadoes in places we'd never had them before, like Michigan and Maine, when they were like F3s and F4s, right after an atmospheric test was done. And at that time, actually, a congressman spoke out and said it's probably related to this bomb testing, and everybody got worked up about it. And then the meteorologist came out and said, oh, no, it's not. They had another explanation. But I've uncovered some articles since then that can show the correlation to nuke testing that was done back in the 60s and 70s and the strength of the El Nino effect. So, it's been well documented how much this stuff has been affecting us. But we're at the top of the food chain, and one of the ways to minimize it is just to try to eat lower on the food chain, meaning plants instead of animals, and look for products that are dairy substitutes.
I'm gonna cut you off right there, Christina, because we're coming up to break. Ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. Final segment coming up. Ooh, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Final segment. And as you know, final segment, I always do plugs and everything else first, because we have a habit of going right up to the end of the segment. But before I give Christina the floor and let her have a bunch of shameless plugs, I want to let everybody know that I found this article earlier today. And the author, I reposted it over on federaljack.com, but as the author says, it's kind of weird that this didn't get a little more attention, being that it's May 4th, and this happened on the 19th, ironically, April 19th. I wonder if anybody that knows anything about dates would want to look into this and see if this is interesting. But Edmund Leopold de Rothschild dies at 84. He died on April 19th, 2012. Very interesting. I didn't even realize the date until I just read it to you guys on air right now. So that's interesting. So if you guys want to go check it out, it's right over on Federal Jack, federaljack.com. Edmund Leopold de Rothschild dies at 84. Okay, Christina, go ahead and give yourself shameless plugs. Any website you want to plug your show, your YouTube page, and your article going up over on Madison Rupert's site. Madison's got a hell of a site over there, ladies and gentlemen. Go check it out, endthelie.com. Go ahead, Christina.
Yeah, I have an article that will be coming out tomorrow on there about some of the things that we talked about tonight. And then FukushimaFacts.com has links to my Twitter and to some of the Facebook pages. And there's links for any resource that you need to get a handle on what exactly is going on with the radiation, even from a day-to-day basis, is on there. And it's very easy to use. And Jules did a really great job laying it out. And one other page that I wanted to promote, because this has been getting a lot of press too, is Mutation Watch. And that was a page that I started about 6 months ago in anticipation of what we were going to be seeing here in the springtime, knowing how much contamination was laying around or was in our soil. And I put out a video about 2 weeks ago where I found these mutated dandelions in certain areas of Michigan. And since then, I've had literally hundreds of pictures sent to me of mutated dandelions and other things, fruit trees, young saplings, mushrooms. A lot of them are from the listeners at Nuked Radio, but some of them are from Orion or YouTube, where they've seen the videos too. And so I'm encouraging people to keep sending me those. And what I'm doing is putting them on Tumblr so that any researcher or grad student who wants to do a paper about this can go and just grab the images and use them. They're up there for anybody to copy and use. And so I put probably about 20 of them up last week. I was just testing the system. I'm going to try to put the rest of them up this week, what we have, and then I'm sending some of those to Lauren Murray, too, because she's already said she wants to use them in her lectures. And I just ask that you shoot it at the highest resolution you can, get the best picture possible, and include your name, date, and location so you get proper credit if it's used. But it seems like it's being seen all over, especially British Columbia and some areas of the West Coast have sent us some really unusual things. One, for instance, was a dandelion that was like the size of a baseball bat. Wow. And it's pretty pervasive. It's showing up actually a lot more than I expected it to be. So the faster we get these things documented and get them out there for people to see, it's a way of people kind of judging what's going on in their area too. If they see that kind of stuff happening, it's not normal for fasciation to occur in nature. It can occur from viruses and insects and things like that, but not across the entire U.S. all at once, you know?
Yeah, that's not a coincidence that Fukushima happens and this huge radiation plume hits the United States. And I wouldn't say it's a one-time thing. I look at it like it's an ongoing thing because, you know, as long as that thing is spewing radiation into the atmosphere, it's going to float over here eventually. Mm-hmm.
And it'll just keep building up in the food chain. And what we tell people, and Kevin Blanche from YouTube, who was on the show yesterday, was saying too, just treat yourself like you already have cancer and take really, really good care of your health. And the mitigation for it is actually pretty easy. So you can get a lot of information from those sites. And then I have a radio show on Tuesdays and Thursdays on Orion from 12 to 1.
Yeah, which, by the way, is awesome. I love your show. And you have some really good guests.
Yeah.
You know, you do a really good show. So kudos to you, Christina. Thank you for doing all that you do. I know you don't get thanks. I know you don't get thanked a lot. I know normally you get harassed. So everybody does appreciate it, even if you don't realize it. And ladies and gentlemen, maybe you should take a cue from her, okay, and do it yourself. And again, I urged last segment, I know sometimes you think it's useless, but call your senators, congressmen, local politicians, everybody and their mother, the health department, the state health department, the CDC, anybody, EPA. Just start making phone calls, emails. Get your friends to do it because this affects everybody. You know, this isn't one of those things that, oh, well, I'm not this, so it doesn't affect me, or I don't believe in this, so it doesn't affect me. No, it doesn't matter if you don't believe in radiation. It affects you. You can go, la, 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 I don't believe it's happening, you know, and that's all well and good, but you will glow in the dark and eventually probably have a third arm growing out of the back of your head. So this does affect you. And what about your children? If you don't care about yourself, if you're, you know, if you don't care, you're whatever, blah, blah, blah. What about your children? You should care about them. Don't be such a selfish prick. Get involved. That's to the people that are, you know, sticking their fingers in their ears. I know most people are concerned, so not everybody's a selfish prick.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great opportunity for people to help each other.
I agree. And you never know, you might make lifetime friends for however long we're left if we don't all glow in the dark.
Yeah, I have already. I mean, some of the people that I've met just from this, we've never had a face-to-face conversation, and I consider them, you know, one of my best friends because of this profound thing that we've gone through together. And we still have a lot of work to do. So, and we need everybody's help that we can get, you know, sharing articles and reposting stuff everywhere, you know, on Twitter and any social media. It really helps. And even going and commenting on articles, when once in a while you do see a mainstream news article, if you go there and comment on it, other people that are commenting will see yours too, and maybe that will, you know, spark some interest.
Let's start calling CNN. You know, Bob Tuskin and I love to do that. We record it all the time, on air and off air. We do it all the time. We call CNN and tell them about, you know, whatever, Bilderberg, whatever else is going on. So let's do it about Fukushima. Everybody do it. You hear this later on in the archive broadcast on YouTube, whatever. Call CNN, call MSNBC, call Fox News, call your local news agencies, hammer them and say, what are you doing? Why are you not covering this? This is like life-ending stuff, and you're not talking about it. People need to be aware of this. Get involved, and you know what? Maybe they'll cover it. Maybe they'll have no choice to. It's happened before. We've forced them to at least bring something up, even if it was only for 30 seconds, because we've hammered them with calls. When I say we, I mean everybody out there. Mm-hmm. We are all in this together. You know, we've done it in the past, so let's do it again. We have to get people to pay attention to this. This is something that's important. I could care less about Dancing with the Stars or any of that other retarded crap. And I guarantee you most people would want to know this information. They're just not privy to it because they know they can't cover this one up. I mean, they can, as you know, to a certain extent with BS, but if people actually knew what was going on, it's really hard to spin that, especially when, you know, you see robots that are made to go in there frying up and everything else. So, man, this is a really important thing. This is not a joke. We need to pay attention, and we need to get involved, and we need to make others aware. Talk to your friends, your family. Reach out to others. This is because this affects everybody. So we might as well, you know, get together and maybe, hopefully, it won't happen. But we still need to get. Eventually, something will happen if there's another earthquake or something. So we need to get the rest of the planet involved in this. We need to get other countries, other experts, other people involved in this. We need to create such an uproar that there is no other choice, because right now they're kind of sticking their fingers in their ear and la, 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 la. Nobody wants to really pay attention to this because they think it only affects Japan. Like Christina said, and this affects way more than Japan. So much more. I mean, they're like Arnie Gunderson. And I'm not saying he's God or anything like that, but the man knows what he's talking about. I would say he's an expert in his field. And he's not the only one. There's others saying the same thing, that pretty much the entire northern hemisphere would be useless. So, do you want to evacuate to the southern hemisphere? Do you have the currency and the funds to do that? No. None of us do. Nobody can run from this. We all live on the same planet, so we need to get together and do something. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time. Man, time just flies by on this show, especially when you come on, Christina and Steve and Paul. I mean, it was a great show. Thank you, all three of you, for coming on. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you stay tuned to the archive channel, DTRH Radio Archives, DT, Delta, Tango, Romeo, Hotel, Radio Archives, all one word, for some new upcoming stuff. I'll see you Sunday. We're out. Ladies and gentlemen, after the show, we recorded a bit of an after show, and Christina got into a few things that we didn't get to touch on air, and then I got Paul's final thoughts and Steve's final thoughts. So I wanted to include it with the YouTube archive and the audio archive of today's show. So here you go, the after show with Christina, Paul, Steve, and myself. Enjoy.
Yeah, I was listening to that live recording of your encounter there where the policeman cut you off, Christina. And it sounded like, it didn't sound like he was really, coming on like a harsh bully or anything. He was just following orders is what he said, asking you if you're all right. The question is, who's issuing these orders and why are they doing these things? You've had cops, say, scratching their heads and wondering what's going on with this whole deal. Why are we out here, pursuing this third-degree petty theft, a year or two ago with the mother of somebody who wasn't even involved with this. I mean, the whole thing was absurd to begin with. But my question was, why aren't these cops standing up to the authority, or at least giving you some report or some avenue of information pertaining to why these warrants or these encounters keep coming down?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I'm definitely going to call those numbers that you guys gave me and at least talk to someone and have a name in my phone. So if this does come up again, there's somebody who at least knows the background that I can call. I'm going to do that at the very least.
Yeah. It's a good idea. Paul, you got any thoughts about that?
Yeah, Christina, do you have any sort of, feeling or any sort of evidence that these police incidents are connected, to some other entity, some other kind of, higher authority or anything like that?
Well, one thing that we noticed, my boyfriend and I both noticed with the first incident where they surrounded the car and everything and they had sent all these guys out, there were 2 undercover guys there that seemed to be hanging back and kind of just watching everything that was going on. They didn't talk to us directly. One of them wouldn't even make eye contact with me. And I had just a really bad vibe from him. I mean, what kind of feelings did I have? I got a bad vibe from this guy. He seemed really out of place and somewhat uncomfortable. And when I mentioned that to my boyfriend later, he had noticed the exact same thing. So it seemed like the undercover guys were kind of running or directing something.
So, when you say undercover, it's because they weren't in police uniform or what?
Yeah, and they came in unmarked cars.
So in other words, they weren't in uniform, and they weren't wearing suits. I mean, when you say undercover, because they
were wearing hoodies, like Detroit Lions. I think the guy had a Detroit Lions sweatshirt on or something. There was nothing that would have indicated that he was a police officer, except he had a badge on a string around his neck that was hanging.
Okay. Wow, that's bizarre.
Yeah, the whole thing sounded to me, Christina, when you explained it, was that it was like these, regular cops in uniform were carrying out this operation, some of them wondering what was going on, while these other 2 jokers here who were undercover were orchestrating the whole thing. You don't know where this was coming from. That was what was so strange about it. That's the impression I got last time you told the story, Christina.
Yeah. And like I said, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time digging into it either, just because it takes me away from the stuff that I really should be doing. And, but as a lesson to anybody, it's certainly good to have a video camera with you so you can document these kinds of things as they happen. And maybe that would help deter it from happening again. I don't know.
Well, there's certain states that make it unlawful to actually record police. I would check that out in your state.
I did tell him that I was recording it, and I had the camera right up on the dashboard, and he said, "That's fine, I'm recording you too." And when I went to the ACLU's website,
yeah,
it said on there that it was legal, although it's often a subject of contention for the police, and there's been numerous court cases about it.
Well, I just know from some of those Occupy incidents, they've been going on around the country.
Yeah.
It's at certain times, excuse me, in certain states, there is a problem. But if there's not a problem in your state, power to you, go at it.
Yeah. It isn't that I'm aware of, but I will double check that.
Because in Texas, just so long as one party rather, to the conversation is aware that it's being recorded, it's all legal.
Yeah.
But you can't wiretap. In other words, you can't just go into somebody else's communications and be silent. So long as you're a party to the conversation, then it's okay.
Right.
So, if that cop seemed to know what was going on, and he didn't have a problem being recorded, then I'd probably take him at his word. But Better safe than sorry.
Yeah.
Christina, you were talking about Geiger counters a little earlier, and you were saying that some of them won't even pick up certain particles of radiation. Is that what you said?
Right. Well, I get asked a lot from people whether or not they need to have a Geiger counter. And what I usually tell people is, it's good to at least maybe borrow one at some point and do some of your own measurements. But in essence, you really don't need one. Just treat everything like it's radioactive and act appropriately, because it probably is to some extent. It's really hard to predict when plumes come through, and you can get a basic idea. A lot of it is common sense type things to avoid precipitation and so forth, and certain foods that you eat are better, like eating lower on the food chain. But the Geiger counters that are available to us, the ones that we can afford that are under $1,000 or so, they're actually a very crude way of measuring radiation. The isotopes, we need to know the exact isotopes and their concentration. And for that, you need to have a gamma spectrometer. Most of the Geiger counters that we have as concerned citizens are reading, are calibrated to cesium. They're not measuring the alpha particles or the hot particles like plutonium, the really dangerous stuff.
Well, can you recalibrate them to measure that?
The one that I have, I can't. I don't know, because there are a lot of different brands of Geigers, but in general, they usually don't measure the alpha radiation.
Which doesn't make sense, but...
No, it doesn't make sense. You're
You'd
right.
think you'd want a meter that measured, like, all types of radiation. Color me stupid, I guess, maybe, foolish me, because I want to be able to detect all the types of radiation out there.
Yeah, they're coming down in price now too. I mean, you can get a decent Geiger counter for like $130, and I don't recommend people buy them on eBay. I recommend they buy them new, or not from like Craigslist, but eBay is probably okay as long as it's a new instrument or one that's been recently calibrated and actually has the sticker on it that it's been calibrated by a professional company that's licensed to do that within the last year, because you need to make sure the readings that you're getting are accurate, especially if you're going to be providing data for other people who are trying to keep track of measurements. And there are some other groups on Facebook, like Radiation Watch, that are putting together maps in the country to try to assess the contamination levels or get an idea for their families and friends and for other people that come to their site. So we're putting a lot of that together, and we need to get everyone involved that we can too, because we need lots of help.
Well, thank you for everything you do, Christina. Steve, any closing thoughts?
Well, I just want to let you know, Christina, we'll be, here and watching, trying to watch your back as best we can. That was what I said I would try to do last time we were on the show, and I was impressed with the fact that you were being harassed. You got to remember, these cops and these people, they have no idea that the people that they work for are maniacs. I mean, look at the country. Look at this country. Law and order is a joke in this country. We talked about Christina Todd Whitman and the whole thing with the EPA during 9/11, regardless of what you believe about 9/11. Here, they just plain out lied to everybody in New York City, exposing them to these toxic chemicals. And she's working for the nuclear industry. She's a big lobbyist. The whole thing. The Bank of... her husband's involved with all these people taking money from this agency, a Citigroup and people like that, New Jersey Port Authority. These are the kinds of people who are just maniacs out there. And, if we don't speak up as citizens, if we don't identify the problems with what's happening environmentally right now, especially with Fukushima, and get them on this issue, there's not going to be much left here to grow anything on the face of this earth.
I agree, Steve. I agree. Paul, any final thoughts?
Christina, I really appreciate your courage. I know it takes a lot to stand out there and be like the focal point for a lot of just animosity, negative energy, things like that. That's what I do every day. I do criminal defense, and I as the lawyer for somebody that everybody hates, everybody essentially hates you too just for standing there next to the person. And I know that takes a lot out of you, and I truly appreciate what you're doing. It was really, really good to be on this show with you, and I wish you well. Stay in touch. I got you down on my Twitter, and maybe we can stay in touch that way.
For sure.
All right. That's it.
Sounds good. Thank you for all your help.
Oh, no problem. My pleasure.
I hope you all enjoyed the show. Thank you for listening. I hope everybody took away some amount of knowledge from this episode, and I hope it shed some light on the things that Christina's been going through because of her ongoing work with alerting the world as to what's going on with Fukushima, the fallout, the radiation, and everything else. Thank you all for listening.